we confess your faithfulness, Baraka. We bless the name of God, Toda. For all that you have done, your steadfast love endures forever.
Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving into a topic that feels really familiar, but I promise you holds some surprising depth: Thanksgiving. And no, I'm not just talking about the holiday. We're going to uncover what this word truly means in its original biblical context, and you might be shocked to find out it's way more active and public than you'd ever guess. So let's just start with the most basic question, right? What even is Thanksgiving? For most of us, I think the answer would be something about a feeling, an internal sense of gratitude. But what if I told you that the ancient understanding was something else entirely? And this right here gets to the very heart of it. We tend to think of Thanksgiving as this passive, private feeling that happens inside our own heads. But in the Bible, it's an active, public, and deeply communal action. It's not just something you feel, it's something you do. It's an out-loud confession about God's goodness, and it's meant to be shared with other people. To really get this, we've got to go back to the source. Our whole journey kicks off with one single Hebrew word that reveals a profound physical truth about what it actually means to give thanks. The main Hebrew verb for to give thanks is yada. And what's just so cool about this is where the word comes from. Its root, yad, literally means hand. I mean, the physical connection is baked right into the DNA of the language. So think about what that means. To yada, to give thanks, was a physical performance. It meant to literally extend your hand, to throw your hands out in a visible, public gesture of praise and acknowledgement. It was an action, not a quiet thought. It was something people saw you do. And if you thought that was interesting, get this. The word yada actually has a dual meaning. It means both to give thanks and to confess. Now, why is that? Because for the ancient Hebrews, these were two sides of the very same coin. Both were about publicly agreeing that what God says is true, whether you were confessing his goodness with your hands raised high or confessing your own faults. Okay, so let's see how this idea actually played out in real life. This concept of active public thanksgiving wasn't just some abstract idea. It was built right into the Old Testament law in a powerful ritual that literally turned gratitude into a giant party. This ritual was called the Todah offering. You can probably hear that root word yada in there. This was a special kind of sacrificial meal you'd offer after God had delivered you from some huge danger. Maybe you survived a battle or recovered from a deadly illness. It was your tangible response to being saved. The whole process was basically a 4-act play. First, you go through a life-threatening crisis and boom, God rescues you. So what do? You bring an offering, an animal plus a whole lot of bread to the temple. But you don't just leave it there. Nope, you host a feast. And as your guests are eating, you are required to do one crucial thing. Tell them the story of how God saved your life. But here's the one little detail that changes everything. There was a very strict rule attached to this Todah offering. All of the meat from the sacrificed animal, and we could be talking about an entire bull here, had to be eaten within a single day. And that one rule is just pure genius, because it reveals the whole point. There's no way you could eat an entire bull by yourself in 24 hours. The rule forced you to throw a massive party. It compelled you to invite your family, your friends, your neighbors, and even the poor to come share in your blessing. It literally transformed a private feeling into a public, community-building celebration. Now, this incredible Old Testament practice doesn't just fade away, not at all. It actually finds its ultimate meaning and fulfillment in the New Testament, pointing forward to an even newer, even greater reality. You can trace a really clear line here. The Todah was a meal celebrating deliverance from physical death. Then you get to the Last Supper, and Jesus takes bread, he gives thanks, the Greek word there is Eucharistasis, and he offers his own body as the ultimate deliverance from eternal death. And of course, this becomes the Christian Eucharist, the church's ongoing meal of thanksgiving for salvation. And just like in Hebrew, the Greek language gives us another huge clue. The word for grace is charis, and the word for thanksgiving is Eucharistia. They come from the same root. The theological idea here is just beautiful. The grace that flows down from God is received by us, and then it rises right back up to God in the form of thanksgiving. It's a perfect circle. This all connects to a fascinating tradition from ancient rabbis who predicted that when the Messiah finally came, all the other sacrifices would end, but the Todah, the sacrifice of thanksgiving, that one would continue forever. It was seen as the permanent, eternal state of being in a right relationship with God. You know, sometimes the best way to understand something is to look at what it's not. So, to really get why Thanksgiving is so important, let's talk about its opposite. In the Bible, ingratitude isn't just a bad mood, it's treated as a core foundational sin with absolutely devastating consequences. The Bible's word for this is grumbling, and we have to be really clear, this is not just petty complaining or having a bad day. In the Bible, grumbling is a full-blown theological crisis. It's a kind of spiritual rebellion where you are essentially accusing God of being a terrible manager of the universe, and you're implying that you know better than him what you really need. At its heart, grumbling is a form of spiritual amnesia. It's a deliberate choice to forget all the ways God has been faithful in the past. Just think about the Israelites in the wilderness. After being miraculously saved from slavery in Egypt, their constant grumbling was basically a rejection of their entire redemption story. It was a rebellion against God's good and sovereign care over them. The Apostle Paul really zeroes in on this in his letter to the Romans. He's diagnosing the root cause of humanity's fall into sin and idolatry. And what's the very first step on that downward spiral? A failure to honor God and a failure to give him thanks. For Paul, ingratitude is the gateway sin that leads straight into spiritual darkness. So after this whole journey from an ancient Hebrew word to a Levitical sacrifice, all the way to its ugly opposite in grumbling, where does it all end up? What is the ultimate destiny of Thanksgiving? Well, we can kind of map out the whole story. It starts in the Old Testament with the Todah meal, celebrating deliverance from physical danger. It's fulfilled in Christ with the Eucharist for our deliverance from sin. It then becomes the sacrifice of praise that's supposed to define the life of the church until, finally, it reaches its ultimate destination, an eternal song of worship that's focused simply on how worthy God is. When you get to the book of Revelation and you get a peek behind the curtain into the throne room of heaven, what's the soundtrack? What is the constant activity? It's worship. It's the sound of angels and every redeemed person from all of history offering a constant, nonstop chorus of thanksgiving and praise to God. So, at the end of the day, a thankful shirt isn't just a nice-to-have virtue. The Bible presents it as the key mark of spiritual maturity in this life and the very essence of what we'll be doing for eternity. It's the song we're learning to sing now that we'll be singing forever. And all of this leaves us with one final big question to think about. If Thanksgiving isn't just a feeling, but a public action, a story you're meant to tell, and the eternal song of heaven, then what truth about God are you confessing with your life today?